is Sasha Watson. I'm a member of SEIU USWW. Yeah, for security. It just means, well, to me, making it a little bit better for everybody who lives here and fair, and kind of making things more socially acceptable for people of color, and we're not always, feeling like a target, and we're supporting labor and Black lives and everything that everybody's coming together here for today.
Is it hard to survive on wages today?
Oh, yes, it is pretty much impossible. I mean, you want us, what's minimum wage, like $10 an hour? I'm only making myself 13, and it's pretty much impossible, struggling every day. And
how do you live on $13 an hour?
With family support, I mean, I really can't. I mean, it's a struggle every day, picking which bills to pay and what not. Sorry, but it's hard.
My name is Karen Saginaw. I'm a member of AFT 2121. I'm here today because the vision that he envisioned and what he stood for seems sometimes like it's further than ever from being realized. And his vision was so reasonable. He wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. What he wanted was so reasonable.
And there's a problem of young people going to college, fee increases, privatization. How is that related to MLK?
Education is the key to a just society, and the ways in which fees have been increased makes it harder and harder for people to get an education unless they already come from a privileged background, and so it is furthering the imbalance. And the idea of, oh, that's all right if you don't have money, you can go to college anyway, you can just owe all that money, means that people leave college with a huge millstone around their neck that they will never get off their neck. And in fact, because the student debt cannot be dissolved by bankruptcy, you put people in a position where, if I were in that position, I would be tempted to leave the public economy and look for ways to make money that was so completely off the table that it would not be garnished, right? I would be tempted to go into a life of crime if I were a young person who owed $100,000 and the only legitimate jobs open to me were minimum wage, and all the money I made would be seized for those debts that I could never get out of.
Jeff Adachi, Public Defender. We're here today at the MLK March, Public Defenders for Racial Justice. This is a new organization that we formed because it's important that public defenders stand with the people. And a big part of that is making sure that our criminal and justice system understands the bite and the burn and the oppression of racism in our society. So this organization has worked with young lawyers, old lawyers, public defenders throughout the country to teach them how to raise issues in bail hearings, in jury selection, in sentencing. And we've also looked to expose racism in the criminal justice system every day. In January of last year, one of our public defenders, Jami Tillotson, was arrested for doing her job. She was pulled out in the courtroom, saw that clients were being harassed by the police, that they were being photographed, and she advised them that they did not have to cooperate with the police, and she was arrested for that. They handcuffed her, they took her to jail. It was outrageous. And when we talked to the police chief about it, they refused to dismiss the case. So we released a videotape. Fortunately, two of my defenders videotaped the whole thing, and we had over 1.5 million views. Within the first week, there were 700 emails the next day demanding that she be released. And so ultimately the case is thrown out. But it goes to show, and nothing happened to the officer who did this to her. It was an outrage, and I think it's galvanized public defenders around the country to stand with our brothers and sisters, and that's why we're here today.
And what does that say to African American clients, that even their attorney can be arrested in a courthouse for trying to represent her clients?
If you watch the videotape of Jami Tillotson being arrested, you see the shock on the face of her clients, two young African Americans who were being harassed by the police. But if they'll do that kind of harassment in court, in the hallway, just think about what happens on the street. And that's why we need to make sure that criminal defense attorneys and public defenders are fighting for their clients.
And right now there's a crisis in San Francisco with Mario Woods. The police chief, Greg Sir, defended his police officers, and the mayor says the solution is tasers. What do you think about that?
There's been a lack of accountability for many, many years. When you're talking about the police department in San Francisco, disproportionate treatment of minorities, people of color, it's even worse in San Francisco than it is in Ferguson. If you're African American, there are 4 times the chance you're going to get stopped by the police, 6 times the chance you're going to be arrested. And so when we talk about the shooting of Mario Woods, when we talk about the shooting of Alex Nieto, these are real issues that are galvanizing people not only in San Francisco but around the nation. And so what we need to do is talk about reform everywhere.
And have your public defenders been intimidated by the arrest of Jami Tillotson?
No, we refuse to be intimidated, and that's why we're here today. We have to join with the struggle, with the movement, and public defenders everywhere, need to support the effort.
My name is Casey Gallagher. I am with the Machinist Union Local 1584, and I'm here today because racial justice and the income inequality is something we must focus on today in the labor movement and also in politics in general.
How is that a question in the labor movement? How do you see it as a question in the labor movement?
We fight for justice, and that's basically at the very principle of what we fight for. Justice for all, lifting up all tides, and you look at racial disparity and wage disparity, that's something we must focus on.
And
the increase of racism has always been there. But what we must do as a collective organization is fight back against that. Because essentially it's all lies. It's divide and conquer. It's what corporations have been doing for so long. It's what politicians have been doing for a very long time, such as the Republican Party. And we're here to basically bring people together to fight for a common good for the people, not for corporations.
Dominique Gilliard.
So what does it mean to be MLK today, and what does it mean for working people, for young people in this country?
It means to celebrate the legacy that so often has been kind of watered down in the way that we remember Dr. King. It's a way of coming out and reclaiming King for the radical vision of justice and humanity that he represented. King had a faithful commitment to the poor, to stand in solidarity internationally against militarism and the effects of capitalism in our nation. And so I'm here to kind of embody that legacy and carry it on to the next generation.
Now, I don't think the corporate media is talking about Martin Luther King's opposition to U.S. military and the other things. How do you think they've changed the meaning of Martin Luther King's life?
Yeah, King's legacy has really been co-opted by the mainstream, the media and other entities that are really just trying to reduce his message to one of integration and tolerance. But King's vision was much more robust than that. King advocated for justice, the sanctity of human life, regardless of what borders might prohibit them from crossing into this country or internationally. We saw that most profoundly in his opposition to the Vietnam War and how prophetic and explicit he was about how evil that war was and the way that it was going to be taking the lives of innocent women and children needlessly.
And there seems to be wars all over the world. The United States military bases, 700. Drones are dropping on people all over the world. Where do you think Martin Luther King would have stood on that?
King would have stood in strong opposition to that. Particularly the last 3 years of King's life, we saw a radical transformation in him where he started to make a connection between domestic exploitation and international exploitation, and the ways in which, in particular, U.S. manifestations of capitalism and militarism were fundamentally connecting those two systems of oppression. And he said that we as Americans, but particularly as Christians, had to stand up in profound opposition to that kind of exploitation.
Are you optimistic? It seems like Trump and these right-wingers are whipping up people against each other, blaming immigrants, blaming Muslims, and this is many years after Martin Luther King.
I'm optimistic in the fact that I think that the Black Lives Matter movement has raised to the consciousness of a lot of people of how these two things are interconnected: police brutality, the killing of unarmed people, and the dehumanizing rhetoric that's going around against immigrants and refugees, and our unwillingness to extend hospitality and love and solidarity to oppressed groups regardless of the color of their skin. So I'm optimistic, and I think right now there's a consciousness that's raising throughout the nation that's standing in opposition to Trump's rhetoric and other politicians who are trying to divide us.
Okay.
It's Kimberly Moses. I'm a member of SEIU 10-1, and I'm the president of the Port of Oakland chapter.
And today, MLK Day is being celebrated here in Oakland. What does that mean to working people, African Americans in Oakland and in this country?
So Dr. King, as well as the civil rights movement, really was about not only equality, but fighting for the rights of working people and working people just in general. And part of the legacy is not only to preserve that, but to continue to fight against the atrocities really that are still being committed against people of color, and also the attacks that are on working people as a class. So that's also part of the legacy that people need to understand, that, you know, black laborers have always been part of this movement, and the movement, you know, starts with, you know, black workers in general.
And is there an increase in bullying, workplace bullying and discrimination in the workplace in Oakland and in California? And do you see that as a danger for all working people?
I think workplace bullying is a symptom of discrimination, where discrimination has a legal relationship and bullying tends to translate in people's biases against people of color. It could be people of color, it could be gender, it could be sexual orientation. Bullying tends to be the result of that type of discrimination. And it's something that's affecting our workers, and it's something that we not only need to bring attention to, but also to fight against.
SEIU has 750,000 members. The unions are more strong in California than most states. Why hasn't the union fully mobilized on these issues in California and nationally, and do you think they should?
I honestly think it is still a transition and departure from business unionism. There's a lot more of our members that are rising up and taking leadership positions to try to move the locals into the direction of true fighting for equality. You know, there are so many things that are affecting workers in general, workers of our class, workers of color, that the unions need to be more proactive in this fight, and that have to take a stand and take a stand not only publicly but with their leadership as well.
And the unions have also come under assault, attacks on pensions. Public workers have come under attack. Public workers are being blamed. They're trying to privatize. Do you see that as part of the attack on particularly African American Latinos who've been able to win public jobs, and now they're under attack by these politicians?
Privatization is a direct attack against workers and has been used as an attack of people in color. I mean, if we could just, we have our own examples here in California, but if we look at what's going on in Michigan, where at an alarming clip that public services are being privatized and are, you know, directly impacting people of color. You look at the water crisis in Detroit, the water crisis in Flint, Michigan, where you have policies like the emergency manager that has been directed against communities of color. So privatization is just a means of the corporations and the state together to take away not only public resources, to attack public workers that by and large are people of color. It is a direct attack on the working class, the working poor, and public service workers.
And I see you're wearing a button, Vote Reach. What is that all about?
So SEIU 10-1 is in election season. We are in our elections for the leadership of our local. There is a slate that is headed by Karen Joubert that is running for president of the local. She's a dynamic leader, and she has the support of our rank and file. So the the slate that we're part of, and I'm also a member on.
What are you running for?
I'm running for area rep for Alameda County, is REACH, which stands for Representation, Education of our Members, Accountability to the Rank and File, Communication and Honesty is what our slate stands for, and that we are continuing to build the movement for the working people through our leadership with the local.
I'm Deirdre Snyder. I'm on the executive board of the Oakland Education Association, and I marched with Martin Luther King in 1963, and I think we have to keep on working because we don't have equality yet.
And there's an effort to bring in more charter schools and privatization. What does that have to do with equality?
Because charter schools have no responsibility, no accountability, and they can work, but they're also they can be terrible, and it's an issue of privatization. Public schools are for everybody, and what's happening now is corporations are buying into the schools. They want to privatize them. They're not interested in citizens who can think critically. They're interested in making money for themselves, and I see what they're doing now is they are defunding the public schools. We don't have the resources we need to teach. We've got good teachers that are completely overloaded. And we need to take the money away from, if their corporations are going to give us money, we still get to say what happens with it. They can't buy public schools and then destroy them, but they make it so it's so hard for the schools to be functional. Then the parents think, oh, gee, I'll go to a charter school. And then the charter schools, they kick out any kid who's not doing well. So they don't want to get rid of public education entirely because they want to be able to dump any of the problems. But they do not offer public education. They do not offer special ed to special ed kids. They don't offer ELD for English language learners. They don't offer AP courses. They are not really interested in serving students. They're interested in making money.
Well, there's no real public oversight of charter schools. And do you think public money should be going to schools where there's a privately run board?
Absolutely not. I mean, it is the law. It passed. I think that has to be changed because there's no reason for us to be giving money to corporations.
Are you in favor of the repeal of the charter school laws, or is there a repeal initiative?
Absolutely. I'm working on that. Okay, charter schools in Oakland are all in the flatlands, and they all have minority students. The white kids don't have to go to charter schools. They get good public schools. This is something seriously wrong. It's institutional racism.
So you're saying that they're resegregating the schools?
They're resegregating the schools. And it's not right.
I'm Craig Gordon. I'm a teacher in the Oakland Public Schools. Well, as what MLK means for educators, what it means for our students is, the aspiration that's still far from being fulfilled for real equality, and we are really, in a lot of ways, further from it than we were the day he died in 1968, with an even wider chasm between, not only between black and white and racially, but in terms of rich and poor, and
You have 100 billionaires in California, yet education is suffering?
Yeah, and I think that what I'm really excited to see happening here today and in the last few years is like really a reclaiming in terms of a really militant, radical message that King had, not just what my students would be presented if all they saw was the textbook, which is sort of a very tame and very safe message that is presented, but rather the idea that we need to actually disrupt society, occupy Washington, D.C. as he wanted to do with a multiracial coalition to end poverty and to end basically, the system that enriches a few at the expense of the many. So that's what he was for. He was, strongly against war, imperialism, and capitalism, and that all fed into racism.
And what does charters have to do with MLK?
Charters? Well, charters...
Because actually they're getting black parents, they're appealing to the black and Latino community that they're going to get a proper education through charters.
Well, sure. Charters is, has what charters has to do with this is that it's yet another attack by the the private sector, by a false solution for the problems that the society creates. So while public education is being destroyed by corporate privatizers, by billionaires who suddenly are so concerned with the welfare of poor people and of black and brown students, they're saying, well, you need to. Here's your alternative. Basically, a private school that takes public dollars, but they compete with each other, and you can basically get into some type of a lottery system where you may or may not get into one that works well or doesn't. They don't work any better than public schools, even though they cherry pick students. But this again is a false solution. It's draining away the kind of tries to drain away people from those who would fight for the resources that we need to have truly high quality education for all students.
Are you supporting the repeal of charter school laws in California?
I do support the repeal of the charter school law in California. I mean, I think that there's no place for public money to be put into charter schools, and I don't think that should be written into our laws.
And then black and brown and indigenous folks up front. Okay? That's how we're rocking today. The children and black and brown and indigenous folks up front. The first time I saw them split was right there.
Sure, my name is Leon Allen. I'm one of the staff organizers at Unite Here. I'm here today because Martin Luther King was a freedom fighter and a fighter for workers' rights and union rights and for people's rights all over the world. So, he was assassinated in Memphis when he was organizing with sanitation workers who went on strike to organize a union. And we're here today to remember the real history of him, not the sanitized, whitewashed version that you're going to hear from Clorox and Google today about how Martin Luther King was all about being friends with everyone.
Now, is there discrimination in the working place against African American and Latinos?
Oh, yes. In our industry, in hospitality, African American workers have systematically been pushed out of hotel jobs here in Oakland.
Isn't that illegal?
I mean, it's illegal if you can prove it. But, what they do is they just don't hire African American folks to the numbers that they hire other people. And so, you can see it when you look at the hotel workers here in the East Bay.
And are there any lawsuits or actions against the discrimination?
As of this moment, no. I'm sure over the course of history there's been many people who have filed lawsuits and actions.
Now, it seems that the repression against African American youth, Latino youth, is growing in this country many years after the death of Martin Luther King. What does that say about America and the struggle in this country for justice?
I mean, I'm not that old, so I can't speak too much to the history, but in my experience, I think more and more folks who are white, black, brown, whatever, wherever you come from, workers and people in this country have to stick together and fight back. Every day we're seeing more and more black and brown folks being murdered by the police, more and more of our members' children and our members getting pushed out of Oakland, getting pushed out of our communities because of gentrification and the massive violence that's happening against our communities. And so, I have members every day that are telling me, I grew up in Oakland, I lived in Oakland for 50 years, now I'm moving to Patterson, Pittsburgh Bay Point, Antioch. People are commuting 2 hours to come in to work in the hospitality industry in the East Bay to serve the richest people in the world, the 1% of the 1% that are working for the tech giants. And we've got to stand up today and say that's not acceptable.
My name's Kathy. I'm a public health worker and have my doctorate of public health.
Where do you work?
I work in public health. I work on policy issues here in the East Bay.
And MLK, what does that mean as far as public health for working people, minority people, blacks, Latinos, and
I think all of the things that MLK stood for and the organizers of this today, which I just want to lift up, that people of color have organized this, and as someone who identifies as white, I think it's important to hear their voices too. But as a public health worker, what I can say is everything that Martin Luther King and people today are talking about, economics, jobs, freedom from police brutality and police being afraid of the police, all of this we have public health evidence that shows there's a direct correlation to quality and length of life. And stress us causing certain diseases and really diminishing not just the people's health who are most negatively affected, but really being detrimental to all of our society as a whole.
And so you're saying that there's discrimination against blacks and Latinos in the healthcare system?
Not just healthcare, things like jobs, access to quality schools, access to public transportation, and being free from police brutality affect health. So yes, in healthcare, but in all of these other sectors too, that's really cumulative and multiplicative and really has detrimental health impacts taken together.
And what's going to change that? Do you think this march will do it?
I think this march is an important part of it, and I think that people power and the fact that this isn't just a march that people have been organizing for a year, not just around this, but to prep for this, but for many other actions, and it's going to be continuing. And so I think the people power, really being engaged in change makes a difference. And I think there are examples coming across the country of changes that have already been made that are things that we need to pay attention to.
Sheila Tully with California Faculty Association at San Francisco State. Labor needs to stand for racial justice. With rising costs of higher education, students are being priced out. And coupled with the housing crisis, they can't do it. They can't do it. So they pay their fees, they buy their books, and they drop out at midterm because it's a perfect storm. And it's really a travesty.
Is this part of privatization, you think?
Absolutely.
How is it part of privatization?
Well, it's not an accident that you have budget crises and cut funding to public higher education at the time that the students in your classes are immigrants and students of color. That's not coincidental. It's absolutely the plan. And we have people like Donald Trump and the Republicans who would be very happy to have higher education belong to the white elite men.
And your union is under attack. You're fighting for better benefits. Is that connected to MLK as far as justice?
Absolutely. Martin Luther King died in Memphis standing up for the sanitation workers. It's all one fight. You can't have racial justice without economic justice. You can't have economic justice without racial justice.
Martin Luther King died a while ago, but it seems like things are getting worse in this country. How do you explain it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a complete, blowback from the gains that were made in the 1960s and 1970s. It's absolute. It's an absolute direct cause and effect.
Now, California has over 100 billionaires. It seems like there's a lot of wealth. Can they afford to have free quality education?
Of course they can. It's a matter of priorities. We make choices every day as a government and as a state, and they're not the right choices in my opinion. And it's really deadly for the future of the state of California. It was higher education and the expansion of higher education that was responsible for that economic boom. We would not have tech in the Silicon Valley if it wasn't for highly educated workers. It's not just random.
My name is Pedro Malave. I'm here with members from SEIU USWW. We're a labor union here that fights for janitors and security guards. We're here basically supporting the community at large, what's happening with our brothers and sisters in the African American community. It really impacts everybody. We can't have a just society when you have, young brothers being murdered senselessly and no kind of repercussion for the system, that's allowing this to take place. So I'm here with my members and other folks from labor, showing our support to the Black Lives Matter movement, which is an absolutely necessary call to action right now for things to change.
I mean, Martin Luther King died some time ago. It seems like it's getting worse in this country. What's going on?
I mean, the situation has been in dire straits since his death. Hum and other leaders in the community that were really trying to create a movement for equality were, basically systematically wiped out. And since then, what you've had is a decline in what was an opportunity for all of society to come together and be better. So it's been, since his death and the death of other leaders, what we're seeing is this is it, right? This is the end result of all those attacks, from those assassinations to the attacks on working people. This is the end, right? This is where we're at. So it's either do we stay here or do we start to build something that's going to make things improve. And this is it, you know, coming together and calling the system to look at what's going on. That's the beginning of it. But, you know, it's been 40, 50 years, right, of those attacks. It's going to be at least 40, 50 years of fighting them back and getting us on track. So, you know.
Well, the SEIU has 750,000 members in California. It's the largest union in the country, or at least in California. Where are all the members?
I mean, the members are hardworking and ensuring that the standards for working class people are being maintained. You know, we have workers in healthcare and public sector and property services, and on all three fronts, we're fighting to maintain standards. So is there union busting going on?
I
mean, we're here. You see us. This is SEIU.
Is there an attack on labor in this country and in California?
Of course. Talk
about it.
It's been the same thing I was talking about with the assassinations on Dr. King. Alongside of that has been attacks on labor unions. The strongest really coming at us in the 80s when Ronald Reagan and then, you know, those folks really started publicly to break apart unions and let the business community know that it was okay for that to happen, right? And since then, you've had a steady decline in union membership, but SEIU is one of few locals, like Unite Here is another local, right? You know, we have brothers and sisters and the laborers, other locals that have been fighting to really maintain what we have and grow. SEIU Unite Here, we have an active campaign in Silicon Valley to raise up standards for workers, property services workers in that region. We know the economy is a service economy now. So if we're going to drive standards for working people, that's the best place to start, because a large majority of workers are service workers.
How can a worker survive in Silicon Valley, a regular working person, with the house prices, and you have, it seems like working people are being pushed out of everywhere in the Bay Area?
Yeah, no, that's the campaign that we're engaging in, and we're going to be working towards. It's called Raising America, and it's you know, we're going to be going to the tech owners, we're going to be going to the building owners in Silicon Valley and talking about how the disparity in wealth can't continue.
Do these billionaires really care?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, we've had some really successful organizing campaigns, and we're going to have some more. So you guys should pay attention to what's going on in Silicon Valley, because service workers are going to be rising up. And, you know, we're out here united, you know, supporting the community, but it's also about getting our members actively involved in a larger struggle for social justice.
My name is Seth Leibson. I'm a head steward with UAW 2865, and I'm involved in showing up for racial justice, which is an organization national organization focused on organizing white people for racial justice in solidarity with Black Lives Matter and other movements.
And UAW 2865 has recently supported the boycott and divestment, and the UAW International has rejected that. What do you think about that? I mean, that issue of justice in the UAW?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the process of appealing the appeal. So, you know, we think that the vote was democratic, and actually we think that a lot of what the UAW International said in its decision supports that the vote was democratic. So we're hopeful that the sort of higher entity that we're appealing to will see the merits of that, yeah.
Well, the UAW supported the boycott of South Africa over apartheid, yet it seems to say it won't support the boycott of Israel around the Palestinians. You think there's a double standard here?
I mean, I think I would leave it to you to say that. I mean, yeah, you know, it's our membership made its feelings very clear, and we're trying to act on what our membership said and to, you know, show the international that this was a legitimate process, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Is there an issue of privatization at UC? The fees that people have to pay to get into the university, inability of large numbers of African American and Latinos to go to UC. You think that that's an issue related to Martin Luther King?
Yeah, absolutely. UC Berkeley is 2% black, the undergraduate student body, which is just atrocious. And yeah, and absolutely it has to do with tuition's gone up, fees in particular have gone up, even though tuition is frozen, fees just keep, yeah, so we're involved in a struggle to keep the public university meaningfully public, and
you think there should be open admission, free admission for all young people in California?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how, right, that was the master plan, and that's what we need to get back to. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what about the regions? There's no labor representatives in the regions. Who's running the University of California?
I mean, I'm not an expert, but from my understanding, there's a lot, finance folks, and I mean, it's the same with every university. Boards and regents and everything are more and more finance and not folks who know anything about education. It's not students, it's not labor, it's not workers, and we believe that we and the people of California should be running the university.
Alejandro Negrete.
Where do you work?
I work for Local 2.
Where's Local 2?
San Francisco. Local 2 is the Hotel Workers Union in San Francisco.
And what's the conditions? Why is MLK important to Local 2 members and your issues?
Oh, well, the fight has always been important, right? I think the things that Martin Luther King Jr. stood for, racial equality, but at the same time, towards the end of his campaigns, recognizing that it wasn't just about racial equality, but economic justice as well, right? Being able to come to that counter, being accepted at the counters, but being able to afford a burger, being able to afford the food that came along with it. So they go hand in hand, right? We see these inequalities in the workplaces as well.
And Local 2 members in San Francisco, how do they survive with the cost of living in San Francisco?
They have to fight, right? They have to fight for their wages. They have to fight for their benefits, right? And as much as things keep housing, food, and everything rises, whenever they're put to the test, they fight for better wages, for better benefits.
And these companies, the billionaires who own San Francisco, it seems they're fighting the Local 2 members even when they want basic living wages.
Well, look, it's a general fight, I think, right? I don't think it's just the hotels. I think our communities as a whole, right? These corporations coming in and, trying to exploit workers. So I think workers need to stand together, be it hotel workers, restaurant workers, right? Our retail industry. We stick together and be able to fight not just the hotels, but other companies as well.
Do you think people are getting fed up about what's happening in this country?
I hope so. It's if we start seeing some more independent candidates, right? More people, working class folks, standing up for themselves and using their voice.
I'm Trish Gore. I'm president of the Oakland Education Association and second grade teacher.
And Trish, why don't you talk about the issues you face in MLK and the issue of what's happening with schools?
What Martin Luther King wanted was equality for all schools and have funding for all schools. What charter schools have done is take away the funding, distract people from what is really important, and what is really important is fully funding our public school system to provide a solid foundation for all students.
Who's behind this? The privatization, the attack on schools?
Well, there are many people that are for the privatization movement. Some feel that they have high motives of trying to support the most needy students. Others are in it for a profit motive because with real estate and cutting down on the costs of running a school and then giving that difference of cost to their funders, or doing real estate deals that line their pockets. And others just want a privatization system. They want a balkanized system so that the power of education is no longer the way for a democratic country to be run.
How is that affecting the children in Oakland that you're trying to represent?
Well, in Oakland, what has happened is that charter schools have taken away more and more revenue from the district. And currently there is a new plan to bring charter schools somehow into OUSD, even though OUSD has no control over charter schools. When Superintendent Wilson came to Oakland, he came with a plan from Denver that has also been tried in New Orleans, in Detroit, in DC. Do you see a theme in these cities? In the cities where they have destroyed public education, they are bringing this concept of common enrollment, where there is one application and all schools, whether they're publicly run and OUSD schools or privately managed charter schools, are in one application. What this is a high level of deceit and trying to fool the public into thinking that both charter schools and public schools are exactly the same, and they are not. They don't have the same transparency, accountability system, or democratic principles that should rule our public schools.
Do you think there's a problem of conflicts of interest and corruption with some of the charter school operators? I mean, it seems to be there are more and more incidents of conflicts of interest and profiteering.
Every day, every week, we see across the country indictments. We just saw the former superintendent of a Southern California district indicted for approving charter schools, and then all of a sudden, his company, his consulting company, is making millions off the charter schools as a consultant. These kind of deals are going through all the time, and even if they're not directly, even if people are not just corrupt and without any kind of conscience going after the money, when you mix these kinds of entities, when you mix private entity with public entity, it's a slippery road, and things do not go well for the public taxpayer.
And in California, you've got over 100 billionaires. You have tremendous wealth. Why are the public schools suffering?
Well, why are the public schools suffering is a question. Why do the billionaires, why does Walton want to contribute $1 billion over the next 5 years to convert and to grow the charter schools? Are they really concerned about the poor children? If they were concerned about the poor children, they wouldn't be closing the stores that employ their parents. It's okay if the parents starve as long as we have control over the children's schools. Is something wrong with this picture?
You're saying Walton family, which owns Walmart, is trying to take over the schools?
Well, I'm saying that they are part of the billionaire, the philanthro-capitalist movement that is, through philanthropy, trying to dictate how our public schools are run. And how they want them run is no unions, first and foremost, and working conditions that make for not a career teacher, but somebody that's going to do a gig for a couple of years before going on to their real job. And the philanthro-capitalists want it that way. They don't want people dedicated to either the schools or the students. They want people that will come in, feel good about doing missionary work for a couple of years, and then move on. Well, co-location is when a private charter school can move into available space at a public school campus. That's due to Proposition 39. There was language that was inserted that allowed that to happen. What it does is set up awful dynamics at a school site campus where two groups of students are really feeling conflict with the others. Even with the best teachers trying to prevent that kind of interaction, it is really not a healthy interaction at all.
Is it creating chaos in the education system? It seems like when they're taking over parts of a school, I mean, one school against another school, I mean, it sounds like it's chaotic.
So in Oakland, there is not co-location in the same building yet. They were almost going to do that at Westlake, and the pushback was so hard that they decided not to do that. But that is something that the philanthro-capitalists still want. The people that are in favor of charter school want to take over the taxpayer-paid public facilities for their own private use. I don't know if you've heard one of the last lines in the movie The Big Short, when one of the culprits said, "They'll just blame the teachers and the unions on this. We don't have to worry." And in fact, they did. This is what is happening all across the country, is if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. It's all diversion, it's all distraction, it's all disruption, and that is their goal.
And technology, the idea of disrupting Uber, making everybody a gig worker, you think they have the same plan for teachers?
Absolutely, absolutely. They want this economy to be a scratch, a scratching, people working just for scratch money. not saving, not being comfortable. They don't want any worker to be comfortable, because once a worker is comfortable, they might start questioning what's around them. They want everybody scared and scrambling. And this is something I thought of this morning. We have a lot of young teachers that aren't willing to stand up for their rights because they're scared. They are fearful for their jobs, they're fearful for retaliation, and that's why we need union protection, so that people are not fearful to do what's right for the students.
Was that what Martin Luther King was fighting for?
Okay, we're going to get to a theme. Martin Luther King was absolutely fighting for the right of people to speak their mind, to not be silent. When you are silent, that is when the oppression really comes to the forefront. And that's what he told people, don't be silent in the face of oppression.
Yeah, well, I'm not a member, but I'm supporting AFSCME.
Why is that?
Today, because I think it's so critical for the labor movement to be part of Black Lives Matter. You know, it's what today is all about, is reclaiming MLK Day and understanding that, you know, civil rights without economic justice is not civil rights at all.